Lieutenant Jake Razor Morrison had seen enough combat zones to know when something didn't belong. The dusty streets of Kandahar were filled with the usual chaos of military life, but the woman walking confidently through the base perimeter caught his attention immediately. She wore standard military fatigues, but something about her bearing suggested she wasn't just another soldier. Jake was part of SEAL Team 6, one of the most elite units in the Navy. His team had been stationed in Afghanistan for 3 months, conducting high-risk missions that most people would never hear about. They were the best of the best, and Jake knew it. His confidence bordered on arrogance, especially when dealing with regular military personnel who hadn't earned their trident. The woman approached the command tent where Jake and his teammates were reviewing intelligence reports. She carried a black briefcase that seemed oddly formal for a war zone. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her green eyes surveyed the area with the precision of someone trained to notice everything. "Excuse me," she said, her voice calm and professional. "I'm looking for the SEAL team leader." Jake looked up from his maps and grinned. At 28, he had the kind of cocky smile that had gotten him both promotions and reprimands throughout his military career. His teammates called him Razor because of his sharp wit and sharper tongue, especially when dealing with people he considered beneath his level. "Well, you found him, sweetheart," Jake said, leaning back in his chair. "Lieutenant Jake Morrison, SEAL Team 6. What can I do for you?" The woman's expression remained neutral, but Jake caught a slight tightening around her eyes. She set the briefcase on the table between them, the metal clasps catching the harsh fluorescent light of the tent. "I have classified materials that need to be delivered to your unit," she said. "The contents require immediate attention and absolute discretion." Jake's teammates gathered around, curious about the interruption. There was Tommy Ghost Chen, the team's sniper, who could hit a target from over a mile away. Marcus Bull Williams served as their demolitions expert, a mountain of a man who could clear a room in seconds. And then there was Alex Prophet Rodriguez, their intelligence specialist, who could hack into enemy communications faster than most people could type. "Classified materials," "Huh?" Jake said, his smirk growing wider. "And what makes you think a regular soldier like you is qualified to handle SEAL-level intelligence?" The woman's jaw tightened slightly, but her voice remained steady. "I'm not at liberty to discuss my qualifications with you, Lieutenant. I'm simply here to make a delivery." Jake stood up, his 6-foot frame towering over the woman. He had been deployed for months, dealing with life-and-death situations that would break most people. The last thing he wanted was some desk jockey trying to tell him how to do his job. "Listen, honey," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "This is a SEAL operation. We don't take orders from pencil pushers no matter how official that briefcase looks. Why don't you run along back to wherever you came from and let the real soldiers handle this?" His teammates chuckled, feeding off their leader's arrogance. They had all earned their place through years of brutal training and combat experience. The woman standing before them looked like she had never seen real action. The woman's eyes flashed dangerously, but she maintained her composure. "Lieutenant Morrison, I strongly advise you to reconsider your attitude. The contents of this briefcase are time-sensitive and critical to your upcoming mission." "Time-sensitive?" Jake laughed, reaching for the briefcase. "Let's see what's so important that they sent a pretty little courier to deliver it personally." The woman's hand shot out faster than Jake expected, blocking his reach. Her grip was surprisingly strong, and for a moment, he felt genuine resistance, but his ego wouldn't let him back down in front of his team. "I said let's see what's inside," Jake repeated, his voice taking on a harder edge. His SEAL training had taught him to project authority, and he wasn't about to let some unknown soldier challenge him in front of his men. The tension in the tent was palpable. Ghost shifted uncomfortably, while Bull cracked his knuckles out of habit. Prophet watched the exchange with calculating eyes, sensing that something wasn't quite right about the situation. The woman released her grip on the briefcase, but didn't step back. "Very well, Lieutenant, but I should warn you that opening this briefcase without proper authorization could have serious consequences for your career." Jake's grin turned predatory. "Sweetheart, I've been facing serious consequences since I was 18 years old. A little paperwork doesn't scare me." He reached for the briefcase clasps again, his fingers working the mechanisms with practiced ease. The metal clicked open with a satisfying sound that echoed through the quiet tent. Jake lifted the lid, expecting to find the usual collection of mission reports, photographs, and tactical information. Instead, he found something that made his blood run cold. The briefcase contained a single folder marked with the highest level of classification he had ever seen. Below it were photographs of targets he recognized from previous missions, some of which were supposed to be completely classified. But what really caught his attention were the orders bearing his own name and signature on operations he had never heard of. "What the hell is this?" Jake muttered, his cockiness evaporating as he stared at the documents. The woman watched his reaction with satisfaction. "Those are records of black operations that your team has been unknowingly participating in for the past 6 months. Operations that were never officially sanctioned and that could land everyone in this tent in federal prison." Jake's teammates crowded around, trying to get a look at the contents. Ghost whistled low under his breath as he recognized some of the target photographs. Bull's face went pale as he read mission details that didn't match his memories of their operations. "This is impossible," Prophet said, his technical mind trying to process what he was seeing. "We would have known if we were being used for unauthorized missions." The woman's expression remained calm, but there was a hint of steel in her voice. "Would you? How many times have you received last-minute mission changes? How many targets have you eliminated based on intelligence that came from sources you were told not to question?" Jake felt his world shifting beneath his feet. The certainty that had carried him through years of military service was cracking. He had always trusted the chain of command, always believed that his missions served a greater good. The possibility that he had been manipulated made him feel physically sick. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice hoarse with shock. The woman straightened her shoulders, and for the first time since entering the tent, she looked like the dangerous person she truly was. "Someone who's been watching your team for a very long time, Lieutenant. Someone who knows exactly what you've been doing and why." Jake stared at her, trying to reconcile the unassuming soldier he had dismissed with the confident woman now standing before him. Her posture had changed, her presence somehow filling the tent in a way that made his SEAL teammates unconsciously step back. "The question now," she continued, "is what you're going to do about it. Because the people responsible for those unauthorized operations know that this briefcase exists, and they're not going to let any of you live long enough to testify about what you've seen." The tent fell silent, except for the distant sounds of base activity. Jake realized that his arrogance had just put his entire team in mortal danger, and the woman he had dismissed as a mere courier was apparently their only hope for survival. "Ma'am," he said quietly, his cocky demeanor completely gone, "I think we need to talk." The woman nodded grimly. "Yes, Lieutenant. I think we do." Outside the tent, neither Jake nor his teammates noticed the figures moving through the shadows of the base, weapons at the ready, closing in on their position with deadly intent. The first gunshot shattered the night air before anyone in the tent could react. Jake's instincts kicked in immediately, his SEAL training overriding his shock about the briefcase contents. He dove toward the woman, tackling her to the ground just as automatic weapons fire erupted around them. "Contact!" Ghost shouted, already moving toward his sniper rifle. "Multiple hostiles! Unknown positions!" The tent canvas exploded in a shower of fabric and metal as bullets tore through their makeshift command center. Bull grabbed his assault rifle and returned fire through the largest hole, his massive frame providing cover for the others. Prophet was already on his radio, trying to call for backup, but only static answered his attempts. "Communications are jammed!" Prophet yelled over the gunfire. "We're on our own!" Jake rolled off the woman and grabbed his sidearm. She was already moving, producing a pistol from somewhere Jake hadn't noticed. Her movements were fluid and professional, nothing like the hesitant soldier he had initially dismissed. "How many?" Jake shouted at her as they took cover behind an overturned table. "At least 12, she replied, checking her weapon with practiced efficiency. "Professional contractors, not regular military. They've been tracking me for 3 days. Another burst of gunfire forced them deeper into cover. Jake could hear his teammates moving through their practiced combat formations, but they were trapped inside the tent with limited options for escape. "Why didn't you tell us this was coming?" Jake demanded. The woman's green eyes met his, and he saw something there that made his stomach drop. She wasn't just confident under fire, she was completely calm, as if this kind of situation was routine for her. "Because I needed to see how your team would react under pressure," she said, "and because this was the only way to flush out the people hunting us." "Us." Jake's voice cracked with disbelief. "Lady, I don't even know who you are." A grenade rolled into the tent, and Bull shouted a warning. Ghost grabbed it and hurled it back outside before it could explode, the blast shaking the ground and temporarily deafening everyone inside. "We need to move!" Ghost called out. "They're trying to box us in." The woman was already on her feet, moving toward the back of the tent with surprising speed. "Follow me," she ordered. "There's an escape route, but we have to move now." Jake's pride rebelled against taking orders from someone whose name he didn't even know, but survival instincts overruled his ego. He signaled his team to follow as the woman cut through the back wall of the tent with a combat knife that seemed to appear from nowhere. They emerged into the chaos of a base under attack. Emergency lights strobed across the compound as soldiers ran for defensive positions. But Jake quickly realized that not all of the soldiers were friendly. Several figures in identical gear were moving through the base with military precision, eliminating anyone who got in their way. "This way," the woman whispered, leading them through shadows that seemed to exist specifically for her use. Her knowledge of the base layout was perfect, as if she had memorized every building, every alley, every potential hiding spot. "How do you know this place so well?" Prophet asked as they moved. "Because I designed the security layout," she replied without looking back, 3 years ago when I was consulting on base defenses. Jake felt another piece of his worldview crack. This woman wasn't just a courier or a regular soldier. She was someone with access to classified base information, someone trusted enough to design military installations. They reached a supply depot on the edge of the base. The woman produced a key that shouldn't have existed and led them inside. The building was filled with standard military equipment, but she moved directly to a specific crate that contained weapons and gear that definitely weren't standard issue. "Gear up," she said, handing out advanced tactical equipment that Jake had only seen in classified briefings. "We have maybe 10 minutes before they track us here." As his team equipped themselves with the high-tech gear, Jake watched the woman transform. She strapped on body armor that looked like it cost more than his annual salary, checked weapons that weren't in any military manual he knew, and activated communication devices that were clearly beyond current military technology. "Okay," Jake said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I want answers. Now. Who are you? What's really in that briefcase? And why are professional killers trying to murder my team?" The woman paused in her preparations and looked at him with something that might have been sympathy. "My name is Sarah Chen. I'm a former military intelligence officer who discovered that a private military contractor called Black Talon has been using SEAL teams to eliminate targets that serve their corporate interests rather than American national security." Ghost looked up sharply at the mention of intelligence work. "Chen? Are you related to Colonel David Chen?" Sarah's expression darkened. "He was my father. Black Talon killed him 6 months ago when he tried to expose their operations. The briefcase contains evidence of every illegal mission they've run using elite military units like yours. Jake felt the full weight of betrayal settling on his shoulders. His team had been used as unwitting assassins, believing they were serving their country while actually serving corporate profits. The missions that had earned them commendations were nothing more than murder for hire. "Why us?" Bull asked, his usually steady hands shaking slightly. "Why our team specifically?" "Because you're the best," Sarah replied grimly. "SEAL Team 6 has a reputation for completing impossible missions without asking questions. Black Talon needed operators who would follow orders without questioning the intelligence behind them." Prophet was scanning the base through a window, watching the systematic search being conducted by their attackers. "They're getting closer. We need to move soon." Sarah nodded and shouldered a pack that seemed to contain enough equipment for a small army. "There's a helicopter waiting at the secondary landing zone. If we can reach it, we can get off this base and disappear long enough to get this evidence to people who can act on it." "And if we can't reach it?" Jake asked. Sarah's smile was cold and professional. "Then we make them pay for every step they take toward us." The sound of approaching vehicles made the decision for them. Jake could see headlights converging on their position from multiple directions. Black Talon wasn't just hunting them. They were conducting a full-scale military operation on an American military base. "How is this possible?" Ghost muttered, watching enemy operatives moving through the base with apparent immunity. "Where's base security?" "Compromised," Sarah replied. "Black Talon has people inside every major military installation. That's how they've been able to operate for so long without detection." Jake felt a rage building inside him that was different from anything he had experienced in combat. His team had been betrayed not just by strangers, but by the very system they had sworn to protect. The men and women they had trusted with their lives were the ones trying to kill them. "What's the plan?" he asked, surprised to realize he was deferring to Sarah's leadership. She checked her watch and looked out at the approaching enemy forces. "We fight our way to that helicopter, and we make sure this evidence reaches the right people. But Jake, I need you to understand something." She turned to face him directly, her green eyes reflecting the harsh lights of the base. "After tonight, your military career is over. All of your careers are over. The moment we walk out of this building, you become enemies of some very powerful people who won't stop hunting you until you're dead." Jake looked at his teammates, men who had followed him through hell without question. They deserved better than to become casualties of someone else's greed. But they also deserved the chance to make their betrayal right. "Then we better make it count," he said grimly. Sarah smiled, and for the first time since he had met her, Jake saw genuine warmth in her expression. "Now you're starting to think like someone I can work with." The sound of boots on gravel outside told them their time was up. Sarah moved to the door and paused, looking back at the four SEALs who were about to risk everything for a woman they had met less than an hour ago. "Stay close, follow my lead, and remember that everyone out there wants us dead. Trust no one except each other." She opened the door and stepped into the night, where dozens of armed professionals were waiting to kill them all. The firefight that erupted outside the supply depot was unlike anything Jake had experienced in his military career. These weren't insurgents with improvised weapons or even regular military forces. Black Talon's operatives moved with the precision of elite special forces, using advanced tactics and equipment that suggested military training at the highest levels. Sarah led them through the chaos with an expertise that left Jake speechless. She seemed to anticipate every enemy movement, guiding his team through defensive positions and escape routes with the skill of someone who had been planning this exact scenario for months. "Sniper!" "2 o'clock!" Ghost called out, diving behind a concrete barrier as bullets shredded the air where he had been standing. Sarah was already moving, producing what looked like a small grenade launcher from her pack. She fired once, and the sniper position erupted in smoke and flame. The precision of her shot told Jake that she had identified the target's exact location without even looking. "How did you know where he was?" Prophet shouted as they advanced toward the landing zone. "Thermal imaging in my helmet display," Sarah replied, helping Bull set up a defensive position behind a destroyed vehicle. "Military technology that's about 5 years ahead of what you've been issued." They fought their way across the base in leapfrog movements, with Sarah calling out enemy positions that his team couldn't even see. Her equipment was beyond anything Jake had imagined, and her tactical knowledge was flawless. But what impressed him most was her leadership under pressure. "Jake, your team needs to know something," Sarah said during a brief lull in the fighting. "The helicopter we're heading for isn't just an escape route. It's equipped with secure communications that will allow us to contact my superior directly." "Your superior?" Jake asked, reloading his weapon while keeping watch for enemy movement. Sarah's expression became carefully neutral. "Someone who has the authority to shut down Black Talon's operations permanently, but we need to reach that helicopter alive for any of this to matter." The enemy forces were closing in from all sides now, using the base's own defensive positions against them. Jake realized that Black Talon had planned this operation with intimate knowledge of the facility, probably using the same security assessments that Sarah had conducted years earlier. "We're outnumbered at least 3-1, Ghost reported grimly, "and they're herding us toward a kill zone near the landing pad." Sarah nodded as if she had expected this development. "Then we don't go where they expect us to go." She led them away from the direct route to the helicopter, instead heading toward the base's communications tower. Jake was about to protest when he realized her strategy. From the elevated position, they would have clear sight lines to the landing zone and could provide covering fire for their final approach. The climb up the tower was harrowing, with enemy forces converging on their position from below. But Sarah's plan worked perfectly. From the top of the communications array, Ghost was able to pick off key enemy operatives, while Bull used his demolitions expertise to create chaos in their ranks. "There's the helicopter," Prophet called out, pointing to a sleek aircraft that was definitely not standard military issue. "But it's surrounded." Jake counted at least 20 enemy operatives in defensive positions around the landing zone. Even with their elevated advantage, the odds of reaching that helicopter alive seemed impossible. "I have an idea," Sarah said, pulling out a device that Jake didn't recognize. "But you're not going to like it." She activated the device, and suddenly every piece of electronic equipment on the base went dead. Emergency lights failed, communications went silent, and even their night vision equipment stopped working. The base was plunged into complete darkness. "EMP burst," Sarah explained. "It'll blind them as much as us, but I know this base better than they do." In the darkness that followed, Sarah guided them down from the tower and across the base, using nothing but her memorized knowledge of the layout. Jake had to trust her completely, following her voice through the blackness, while enemy forces stumbled around them in confusion. They reached the helicopter just as the base's backup power systems began to restore some lighting. The aircraft was indeed surrounded, but the enemy operatives were still disoriented from the electromagnetic pulse. "Go!" Sarah shouted, providing covering fire as Jake's team sprinted toward the helicopter. The pilot was already spinning up the rotors as they approached. Jake could see that it wasn't a regular military aviator, but someone in civilian clothing who moved with the same professional confidence as Sarah. Bull and Prophet made it to the aircraft first, immediately taking defensive positions to cover the others. Ghost was laying down precision fire that kept the enemy operatives pinned behind their cover. But Sarah was still exposed in the open, fighting a running battle against overwhelming odds. "We have to go back for her!" Jake shouted over the rotor noise. "Negative!" Sarah's voice came through his earpiece. "Get that briefcase to the helicopter! That's the mission!" Jake watched in horror as Black Talon operatives closed in on Sarah's position. She was fighting with incredible skill, but there were simply too many of them. He made a decision that would have gotten him court-martialed under normal circumstances. "Ghost, cover me!" Jake sprinted back toward Sarah's position, his SEAL training taking over as he moved through enemy fire. He reached Sarah just as her ammunition ran out. Back to back, they fought their way toward the helicopter, using the last of their equipment and pure desperation. Jake had never experienced combat at this intensity, but Sarah seemed energized by it, as if this was exactly the situation she had been preparing for her entire career. They made it to the helicopter with seconds to spare, diving into the aircraft as the pilot lifted off under heavy fire. The aircraft's armor held against the small arms fire from below, but Jake could see enemy vehicles mobilizing to pursue them. "Are we clear?" he gasped, trying to catch his breath. "Not even close," the pilot replied grimly. "Black Talon has air assets. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they scramble fighters." Sarah was already activating the helicopter's communication system, her fingers flying over controls that looked more advanced than anything Jake had seen in military aircraft. The screen that came to life showed a secure video connection to someone in what appeared to be a high-level government office. "General Morrison," Sarah said formally, and Jake's blood turned to ice. The face on the screen was older, weathered by years of military service, but unmistakably familiar. It was Jake's father, a man he hadn't spoken to in 3 years due to a bitter argument about Jake's career choices. "Report, Colonel Chen," the general said, his voice carrying the authority that had made him one of the most respected officers in the military. "Colonel?" Jake stared at Sarah in shock as the pieces finally fell into place. She wasn't just a former intelligence officer. She was a full colonel in military intelligence, which meant she outranked everyone in the helicopter by a significant margin. "Sir, we have the Black Talon evidence package and 4 SEAL operators who can testify to unauthorized mission usage," Sarah reported. "But we're currently being pursued by hostile air assets." General Morrison's eyes found Jake on the screen, and for a moment, father and son stared at each other through the video link. "Lieutenant Morrison, I see you've managed to get yourself into considerable trouble." "Dad, Jake started, but the general cut him off with a gesture. "Colonel Chen has been conducting a classified investigation into Black Talon's operations for the past year. Your team was selected for this operation not because you were compromised, but because we needed operators we could trust to handle the evidence properly." The revelation hit Jake like a physical blow. The entire evening had been a setup, but not by Black Talon. It had been an elaborate sting operation designed to flush out the contractors and gather evidence of their crimes. "The briefcase?" Jake asked weakly. "Contains real evidence," Sarah confirmed, "but also tracking devices that allowed us to identify every Black Talon operative on the base. The attack was expected and planned for." "Sir," the pilot interrupted urgently, "we have incoming missiles. 2 fighters approaching fast." General Morrison's expression hardened. "Execute blackout protocol. Full military response is authorized." Jake watched in amazement as the night sky around them suddenly filled with military aircraft. F-22 fighters appeared from nowhere, engaging the Black Talon aircraft with decisive force. Ground forces that Jake recognized as legitimate military units surrounded the base below, arresting the surviving contractors. "Ladies and gentlemen," General Morrison announced through the communication system, "Black Talon Corporation has just been designated a terrorist organization by executive order. Their contracts are terminated, their assets are frozen, and their personnel are being taken into custody." Sarah finally relaxed, leaning back in her seat with obvious relief. "Mission accomplished, sir." "Outstanding work, Colonel. All of you." The general's eyes found Jake again. "Lieutenant Morrison, your team's conduct tonight was exemplary. You'll be debriefed and reassigned to a new unit that will be hunting down the remaining Black Talon cells." As the helicopter flew toward safety, Jake looked at Sarah with new respect. "Colonel Chen, I owe you an apology." Sarah smiled, the first genuine smile he had seen from her all evening. "Lieutenant, you reacted exactly as we hoped you would. Your team's loyalty to each other and your willingness to fight for what's right is exactly why you were chosen for this operation." "And my father knew about this the whole time?" "Your father recommended your team personally," Sarah replied. "He said that if anyone could be trusted with a mission this sensitive, it would be his son and the operators he had trained." Jake felt a complicated mix of emotions as he processed the evening's events. His arrogance had been completely unfounded, but his team had proven themselves when it mattered most. They had been betrayed, but by the enemy, rather than their own command structure. "So what happens now?" Ghost asked from his position near the helicopter's door. Sarah looked out at the military aircraft escorting them to safety. "Now we finish what we started. Black Talon had operations running in 17 countries. We're going to shut down every single one of them." "And the briefcase?" Prophet inquired. "Goes to a congressional committee that's been waiting 2 years for this evidence," Sarah replied. "By tomorrow morning, there will be hearings, indictments, and a complete restructuring of how military contractors are supervised." Jake leaned back in his seat, finally allowing himself to relax. The night had challenged everything he thought he knew about military service, but it had also reminded him why he had chosen to become a SEAL in the first place: to serve something greater than himself, to protect people who couldn't protect themselves, and to stand against those who would abuse power for personal gain. "Colonel Chen," he said formally, "it's been an honor serving with you." Sarah's smile widened. "The honor was mine, Lieutenant. And please, call me Sarah. We're going to be working together for a long time." As the helicopter carried them toward their new mission, Jake realized that his military career wasn't ending. It was just beginning in a way he had never imagined possible.